Good evening. Welcome to another nightly devotional. We're continuing on our journey through Matthew chapter 5 and following as we're looking at Christ's seminal teaching, the Sermon on the Mount. We finished up the Beatitudes yesterday. Today we're coming to you from Matthew chapter 5 verses 13 through 16. It says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Now, when we look at these two analogies of who followers of Christ are supposed to be, remember that Jesus is sitting on the mountainside and he's speaking to the crowds laid out before him. He's given them the principles, those third person summary statements that we call the Beatitudes. And then he turns to them in verses 11 and 12 and says, "But blessed are you," speaking directly to them instead of in the third person as objective sense. And now he continues on in that vein. You are the salt of the earth. Now, salt has several different aspects or usefulness, several different uses, I guess I should say, that we utilize it for. Number one is for taste. I mean, it wakens up a food. It gives it a pop, a sense of increasing its own flavor. Another use of salt that at least we put it to is quite often in the wintertime for our roads and our sidewalks and our stairs to melt the ice that's there because it lowers the freezing temperature required. And so that makes for safe driving and for safe walking, and it makes for rusting out our vehicles incredibly quickly. But the third reason or use of salt is kind of fallen by the wayside for most of us. You probably in your life have never done this unless you're one of the rare exceptions. Salt used to be used, quite primarily even, for the preserving of food. So if you've ever had a Virginia cured ham or a salt cured ham or a country style ham, it's all referencing this idea of a ham being hung up after having been rolled and thoroughly coated in salt. And it's hung in a place outside of where it's not in the sun's direct rays, where a breeze can get to it and air can get all around it. The Italians are masters of this with their prosciutto and salami and pastrami's and all their other sorts of ways that they season and spice and allow meats to age outside of refrigeration. But that's the way they used to preserve food. The food would need to be preserved and would thereby be seasoned as well. In fact, too much so that when you're getting ready to eat a country style ham, you want to rinse that puppy off and soak it in water maybe once or twice and get rid of some of the excess salt in it. So salt was useful for preserving something other than salt. Similarly, if you think about light, it says, "Here you are a light of the world," and the imagery is of a town up on a hill that gets clearly seen. So too, a light on a lampstand, you don't cover it up and hide it. No, the light is easily seen. But that's not true during daytime hours. Light isn't very useful during the light. It's only useful during the night. In fact, in many ways, I would say that that's what these two have in common, these two analogies, salt of the earth and light of the world. And what's significant is the phrase that follows salt and light. You're supposed to be the salt of the earth, and you're supposed to be the light of the world. In other words, Christians, followers of Christ, are supposed to be distinct and different from the world in which we live. We are supposed to be making a difference. We're supposed to be preserving and enriching and bringing flavor to the world, if you will. But we're also supposed to be the light of the world, which shows them the pathway, shows them the way in which they're supposed to live. But it implies very heavily that the usefulness of salt and the usefulness of light is the fact that salt is not being added to more salt, but salt is being added to meat. And light, a candle isn't being lit in the daytime, it's being lit at night. And in fact, I would posit this, that Christians are most useful in the midst of the world. Not of the world, but in the midst of it. There's an old saying goes that Christians are a lot like manure. They fertilize the fields when spread out, but when piled together, nobody can stand the stench. So one of the major ways we need to begin to refocus how we live our Christian lives is, rather than seeking to constantly dwell within community of fellow Christians, we're supposed to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. We're supposed to be out in the midst of those who are not yet followers of the way, that they could see our good deeds and glorify our Father in heaven, thereby becoming part of the salt and of the light. I pray that you are seeking to make a difference in the world by the way you live and act in it. We are not supposed to be camouflaged Christians, no different from the world we're called to save. We're supposed to be salt and light. May our great God and King bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you, and may you make a difference in the world. May you make it more tasty. May you preserve those around you, and may you show others the way in which they should go. Thank you, and good night.